Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the most dangerous situation you've ever been in? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I was lost drunk one night trying to walk 6 miles home and wandered into a bad neighborhood. A group of guys found me and said they'd call me a cab if I gave them all my money. I was surrounded, so it felt like a demand more than a request. I did, and they said they needed more and took me to an ATM to withdraw more. They sat me down on a bench and said they were calling a cab, but I started to sense something was off and ran. They caught up to me, and one of them was talking about beating the shit out of me for running. But fortunately, the older guy in the group was like, "We have his money, let's just leave him be." I reported it to the police, but they just dismissed me by saying basically, "You shouldn't have been in that neighborhood." My ex-roommate, college, brought home a homeless man to live with us. They started dating and refused to comply with our house rules. Found what I assume was a brick of drugs wrapped in plastic wrap in the shared bathroom. He had friends come around in the front porch a few times that were sketchy. He lied about his age and had been in jail several times for battery on his baby mom. Roommate ended up getting evicted for breaking the lease by having him there. Other roommates moved out as they were uncomfortable. I ended up living in a 4-bedroom house alone for 3 months in a sketchy part of our college town. That was all after our neighbor's drug house got shot up and we had to drive by shooting spray the houses with bullets. Fun times. In my opinion, a very dangerous situation is when you are slowly dying in the hospital and the nurses call you lazy and a drama queen. After a ton of surgeries and horrific procedures, my body finally gave out and I died and woke up intubated for a week. I remember wondering what had happened for them to take me seriously. As this was when I got my hysterectomy 6 years ago, and the doctor cut my bowel on the way out, causing severe sepsis and then septic shock. They tried to fix it for over a month and a half, and nothing they did helped. After my 4th and largest surgery, my blood pressure could not be properly maintained, so they took me to the ICU, and 24 hours later I coded. Everything that happened to me was 100% preventable. Laying there in a hospital bed, knowing that something is terribly wrong with you, and being told that you're drug-seeking or lazy was one of the scariest things that ever happened to me. I was biking a fire road out to the Cascade Mountains late at night after hiking and fishing all day. As I crested a small hill, I came upon a full-sized mountain lion who was crossing the road 20 feet ahead of me and had stopped to check me out. Longest 20 to 30 seconds of my life. Strangely, the most dangerous situation I've ever been in actually didn't feel dangerous at all while it was happening. I never felt myself to be in danger, of dying at least, but that was probably just dissociative shock. When I was 17, my family of me, my twin brother, younger brother, mother and stepdad, both physically disabled, were victims of a violent home invasion by 3 armed intruders. They came through the backyard and caught my mother by surprise, and holding her at gunpoint, were able to enter the house and subdue the rest of us. They were surprised when they discovered my 8-year-old brother in the house, and I fully believe they had not been there, they may have killed us. Their intention was primarily robbery, but we were already poor, so there was some power tripping, beating, and essaying. But all of my family survived that night. All 3 were later identified out of mugshots and lineups and ended up in prison. They were arrested a week after the home invasion for a different crime of murdering a gas station clerk during a robbery, and were connected to a spree of home invasions and burglaries that occurred around that time. They'll die in prison if they haven't already. Vegas. Came out of Spearmint Rhino with a buddy, then by chance we ended up with the same taxi driver that dropped us off earlier. He asks if we still wanted to go see some girls at 3 a.m. My buddy said, "F it, let's go." We go and end up in the middle of nowhere in some ghetto apartment complex, a few miles away from the strip, sketchy as hell. Driver knocks at the door, and this guy answers and leads us to one of the bedrooms where they had 2 Asian girls in there. I go to the living room to check out the place, and there were 5 heavily tattooed Russian guys just chilling there in the living room. I told the driver we'd changed our minds and here's $60 and get us out of here. I suppose it was 1969 in Vietnam. The explosion went off right next to me. I remember being on my back as guys rushed up to me, turning my head to one side, and it was blocked by something. I couldn't look to my right. Then I realized the obstruction was my right foot. I remember wondering how that could be. As it turned out, my right leg was nearly severed mid-femur, bent there and under me, hands on me, moving me. The sight of an arc of blood, then it was dark. Sometime later, conscious again, guy hovering over me saying, "I'd be alright, hang in there." Shouts, somebody shouting angrily that an air evac was needed. Blackness, pain, cheese, agony, and realization I was being carried quickly and roughly, hands grabbing and sliding me into what brain said was a helo. Blank. Noise at the copter and corpsman bending over me, asking questions. I think I may have been answering, but I'm not sure. Darkness. Then I'm laying in a room, people all around, and surgical stuff. Some doctor saying something about how he can wait no longer. Something else I don't catch. I can barely move, but now people lay over my chest, as if to hold me down. And I remember screaming like I'd never screamed before, and screaming, and then nothing. It took them 2 months to get that leg together again and healed. Another month of therapy, and building muscle, and learning how to walk again. I was told that I was lucky, that the techniques used to save the leg and make it usable again after the sort of injury it's been subjected to had only recently been developed. I suppose you could say that going into combat is at least fairly dangerous. I was at a Christian youth camp in New Mexico when I was younger, working after being a camper there for a few years. My best friend at the time and I had gotten the job together, and we were tasked with small chores and projects throughout the 2 weeks we would be staying. One of which was hauling the trash up to the dumpster positioned about 500 yards above the camp. We would use an older small John Deere tractor to pull a trailer with said trash up the hill and throw the bags into the dumpster by hand. The day started no different with us heading up, him driving and me on his right, just leaning on the tire well, I think. When we reached the dumpster, a big bear exploded out of the dumpster with such speed and force, it sounded like a car accident. We were both stunned and still on the tractor about 20 feet away. We saw her disappear into the wooded area and we proceeded closer to the dumpster. The plastic lid on the thing had claw marks that pierced all the way through it, a few inches in length. Right as we're admiring the strength of the bear, we hear a shuffle inside of the dumpster. We take a peek inside, and there's a baby bear. I don't have enough experience to estimate age, but it was pretty small and non-frightening, obviously. On the other hand, we had not realized its mother had been lurking behind us in the woods. We hear her growl and snort or something of the sort, coming from somewhere behind us, and both bolt down the mountain toward the campsite. We informed the older staff at the camp, being we were only 16 and 15 at the time. They said it's best to wait a couple hours and hopefully the bears would have moved on. A few hours later, a group of us went up to the truck of another staff member. The bears had left, but we showed them the claw marks on the dumpster. They said we were pretty lucky, yada yada yada. It wasn't until I aged a bit that I realized the potential negative outcome that day could have had. She didn't seem to be breathing down our necks, but the sound she made was visceral. I don't think I've ever felt the hair on my neck raise like that. Anyway, all is well. I hope you guys are having a good day. Peace.
That's a scary situation for sure. A lot of these are, all of them really. But you were cool, calm, and collected, and you got yourself out of there, so great job.
I manage retail operation Ali Al Salam Air Force Base. In Kuwait, on 2 outposts and 2 remote sites. One of the remote sites was in the DMZ with Iraq. I had to drive through a small village to get to the post. Kids used to run up to the truck. We would stop and hand out candy and cokes. I was sitting in the driver's seat when this dude jumped into the street and opened up with an AK-47. I dove into the pedals and locals got the guy. Years later, I'm driving at night in town. Some guy lights a multi-pack of fireworks and throws it into the road. All I heard was the AK-47 firing. I found myself hiding in the pedals again, this time at 45 miles per hour in traffic. At no time was anyone injured. I was held hostage in my apartment while pregnant by my neighbor who was having a mental break from a combination of bipolar disorder and PTSD from the military. He wanted me to pack a bag and come live in the woods with him. He told me that he had been breathing me in from the walls, listening to me sleep, and many other strange things along the line that basically summed up that he had become obsessed with me in the time I had lived next door. He screamed at me when my phone kept going off with my partner at the time and some of my family trying to get a hold of me. I was eventually able to convince him that I would come with him, but that I needed to take care of some things first, and that I would meet him somewhere. I got in my car immediately and called the police and my family back. After he left my apartment, it took them 8 weeks before they found him in the woods a state over, completely naked. I was grabbed while beach walking on a solo holiday. Dude was dragging me into the mangroves, was fighting and screaming my head off. Strangers heard and came running. Dude let me go. Hotel room at London airport years ago. Middle of the night, was awake reading. All lights on. Saw the doorknob open and hand come and go up trying to release the security lock. In a cab, back door was broken. Gesticulated for me to get in front. I was on high alert. And dude started taking back deserted streets. Starts feeling up my leg. Asks me to give him my watch. I would move his hand to his own lap and he would try again. I had my phone in my hand. He grabbed it out of my hand and starts scrolling through my pictures and then put the phone on the dash in front of him. The roads were bad, lots of potholes, so he was going slow. I saw a guy coming out of a door ahead, so when the taxi slowed to an almost stop for a pothole, I leaned over, grabbed my phone, jumped out of the car, threw what I paid for the cab journey there, through the window, and started running. I was in such a panic, I ran through a military checkpoint, ducked under the little wood barrier. I threw the money because I thought he would chase me if I didn't. Also, the police got involved. I didn't want him saying I was a fare jumper. I was driving as a Lyft driver on Western Ave in Chicago 6 years or so back. I had picked up a brother and sister with her infant child. Brother is sitting up with me pre-COVID trying to hit on me. I'm politely dogging him. She's in the back with her daughter in the car seat. This huge blacked out SUV was trying to speed past me, but I beat them. Had a good laugh, whatever. Naive old me. Girl in the back rolls down the window and flips the driver off. Huge mistake. He drives up to me on my right side, points a gun at me and cocks it. I literally just stared at him with wide eyes. I told the girl in the back to apologize. She did. I just looked straight ahead. Guy in SUV drives off. I stopped driving that night and hung with some friends. Went back to it the next day and avoided the city, particularly Western Ave, and also child-locked my windows before every new rider. Oh, and the car ride after was silent. Brother stopped his advances, and they tipped me a bunch of cash immediately. after the incident, which is why I took him home. I think they gave me 180 or so. Working in a shit neighborhood, the boss brought some woman and her mentally challenged child to show off her work one night. Kid was 15 or 16 years old, I'm guessing. Then he disappeared. Couldn't find him. All of us were yelling his name and looking. It's like midnight, and I started walking the block, turned a corner, come back around. I turned down the alley into an episode of The Wire. Group of guys on the left, a different group on the right. Each group had a gym bag. They looked at me and just stared. I threw my hands in the air and just said, I don't give a what's going on here. I'm just looking for a mentally challenged kid. I'm sure you heard me yelling out for Charlie. If you listen, you can hear my coworkers yelling for him as well. But the guy said, ain't no Charlie down here. I turned around and walked down the block. Found the kid an hour later, hiding in the drop ceiling. My brother and I were victims of an armed invasion. I was getting ready to go swimming at a friend's place, so I had my swim trunks on, getting my shit together, then heard a knock at the door. Normally I always look through the peephole, especially if I'm not expecting anyone, but I was distracted getting ready to leave and just opened the door. A guy with a baseball cap kinda pulled low over his face was holding a pistol with both hands and told me to get down on the ground. I was confused and thought for a split second he was a cop or something. But then his buddy came around the corner into view wearing a ski mask. The second guy didn't have a gun. I instinctually grabbed the first guy's wrist with both of my hands, forcefully pointing the gun down toward the ground, and started yelling for my brother. I'm struggling with the gun guy. The ski mask guy is yelling stuff I don't recall really. And then my brother ran up from his room and tackled us all down to the ground. When we all scrambled to get up, the baseball cap guy still had the gun, and the ski mask guy said, just shoot him. At that point, I grabbed my brother and pushed him toward the stairs. It was those type of apartments with hallways and corridors that lead to outdoor stairs, and yelled for him to run. We both ran down the stairs, while fully expecting to get shot in the back. I made a ruckus and started yelling and banging on every apartment door downstairs to get other people's attention in case they came after us. After a few minutes, my brother and I cautiously went back up the outer hallway, and door was wide open but didn't hear any movement. They ransacked the apartment but ultimately didn't make out with much: a laptop, a revolver that was under my mattress, my wallet that had $20 cash, and my DL in it. A neighbor called the cops. When they showed up, they asked a bunch of questions, but we weren't much help because we had no clue who they were. That was 17 years ago, and I still have PTSD from it, and am overly cautious about answering doors and making triple sure the gate is closed and the doors are locked. I live in a house now with my wife and kids. Additionally, there's always a non-child accessible firearm somewhere that's easily in reach if something pops off. I don't live in fear or anything, but it was a tough situation, and I often wonder if we had gotten shot or killed, would they have gotten away with it, since nothing ever came of the robbery itself. Anyway, I'm extremely grateful it went the way it did, and we made it out alright. While tubing down a river with some friends, my buddy got into an argument with his very drunk girlfriend, and she decided to bail off the tube without a life jacket to get away from him. We were in a deep part of the river, and she immediately started struggling to keep her head above the water. I had a life jacket on and jumped in after her. The tubes at this point had drifted to the side of the river, where there was a bunch of tree roots, branches, and downed trees along the bank. I went to throw her up on the tube, and doing so got pushed under. My life vest got snagged on a submerged branch, and I got held under as the group of tubes went over me. I was in complete panic mode as I ran out of breath. All of a sudden, a hand grabbed onto me and gave me a big yank. It was another drunk buddy who had seen what happened. He was just smiling and said, "You look like you needed a hand." He pulled me onto his raft and most likely saved my life, and he apparently Didn't even remember doing it when I thanked him again the next day. I was in Barcelona a good few years ago with friends. Ended up in a dodgy local bar and chatting to the barman for a good while. He finished his shift and offered to take us to a nightclub close by. We all jumped in a taxi. He got in the front, we got in the back, I sat in the middle. Started driving, and my two friends were clearly wasted, so didn't know what was happening. I got a bit nervous as we started leaving the built-up area of the city. I asked the guy we were with how long. He said something in Spanish and laughed, as did the taxi driver. I knew we were in trouble. We stopped at some traffic lights and I opened both doors and pushed my mates out and made a bit of a scene. Some other taxi drivers saw and came over. The taxi we were in sped off. The taxi drivers that were stopped near us took us back to the city and told us that we weren't in a taxi and we were nowhere near a nightclub. We were in a semi-rural area that had no reason to be near. They were only there as it was near their taxi office. Me and some buddies and girlfriends were beach camping at Port A around marker 10, maybe 15 years ago, and 3 gang dudes from Corpus Christi tried to rob the shit out of us around 3 a.m. They started by slashing the tires on 2 cars and made a scuffle, so when my friends left the tent, they hit them and had knives. I was asleep in the 3rd car with contact lenses out and woke up hearing a brawl and gun, gun, gun. My phone battery was so nearly dead, but I called 911 and said, send everybody. Well, my friends luckily are kinda ninja, so we had a decent-sized beach fire pit with a couple shovels and a garden hoe. One buddy made it to the garden hoe and full swing connected on a dude's head. Gnarly. I ended up seeing the guy and the side of his head like flapped open, and not in a small way. Other friend made it to a shovel and connected on a dude's chest for a decent puncture wound. And pretty quickly the cops got there. The guy tried to run and the cop said he did a flying knee takedown and blood started going everywhere. The cops seemed like the garden hoe dude may die, but later, we found out he was in the ICU for a week or so and lived. But they also said, usually y'all are stabbed, your women are stabbed, and your car is stolen in these situations. And these good guys don't usually win. A couple friends went to the hospital. Me and another guy stayed at the campsite. Sure enough, at like 8 a.m. an SUV drove by us and yelled, we're gonna come back and blast y'all. So I guess the 3rd guy already made bail. So I called the cops again, and during the wait for them to get there, I used our last shovel that wasn't taken for evidence to dig a sand bunker for the incoming drive-by. The cops stayed as we packed and dismantled our campsite and said, they probably won't track us to Austin, but to stay alert. And we were on edge for a few weeks since the news put my name in there. We never did beach camping again, the end. I also got robbed at gunpoint on Cesar Chavez 35 and had been to some trap house in South Dallas, but those are runner-up stories. I was at a rural PA field party that was raided by the police who were looking for someone that had stabbed someone an hour earlier. It was pretty chaotic. A bunch of drunk underage high schoolers running around freaking out thinking they were getting busted for drinking beer. A bunch of panicky cops running around screaming names of people they were looking for. I walked away from the main bonfire where all the chaos was and wandered into where all the cars were parked. I was sipping a beer and leaning against some random car when a cop with a shotgun walked out of the darkness. Through stupid bad luck, I was leaning on the car of one of the suspects. The cop said, Pat, we just want to talk. That it's okay? My dumb drunk ass was thinking, I'm not Pat. I'll show him my license to prove it. When I reached for my wallet, the cop dropped to one knee and slammed the shotgun and screamed, put your hands up, Pat! I froze, and after a second, the cop said, kind of annoyed, you're not Pat. I got kidnapped in Romania within the first hour of me being there. Arrived at 5 a.m. via train. left the train station to try and find an ATM to get money. Some guy started talking to me, and then a cab pulled up, and the guy threw me into the back seat. They drove me to some ATM in the middle of nowhere, made me take out the max, and then took me the rest of my stuff. Luckily, they just left me there and only took my stuff, and that I had one of those undershirt fanny packs so I could keep my passport. It took me about an hour and a half to walk to the downtown center, and then another 45 minutes to find my hostel, since I was going off memory of the address and hostel name. Oddly enough, beside that experience, I had a wonderful trip, and everyone else I met in Bucharest was absolutely wonderful. The hostel people were so kind, and they basically helped subsidize my stay while I sorted things out with my insurance and the police, and basically found me a ton of things to do for free, provided me food, let me stay, and pay the tab once I'd left, rather than up front. I'm so appreciative of their kindness. Lots of close calls, but only one that involved my family. Borrowed my brother's boat. It was a Mint Invader with a 200 horsepower 2-stroke Johnson outboard. He told me to mix the fuel 40-1 instead of the 50-1 called for, and that was going to bite me in the ass later. It started out a beautiful sunny day. Water was calm, and we enjoyed driving around the lake. Off in the distance, it looked like smoke from the forest fires. I only realized later on it was thunderstorm moving in. When I did understand what was happening, I gunned the engine for it to sputter and die. The spark plug was fouled with oil. Then the storm was on us. Strong winds, big waves, and lightning all around us. Being the highest point on the lake during a lightning storm is not something you want to be part of. The kids were screaming while I frantically tried to get the engine started. With the heavy rain pounding down on us, I managed to get the motor running, but it would only idle rough, and it was slow going to shore. We managed to limp it to someone's cabin, and the family ran and knocked on the door. Meanwhile, I'm frantically trying to tie the boat to the metal dock, but the waves were making it almost impossible. I calculated the odds to being nailed by the lightning and contemplated just letting the boat go and running for safety. But I decided I'd rather get juiced than have to explain to my brother why his boat got broken up. I did manage to tie the boat up and get to safety. When we returned his boat, he asked how things go. We just said it was great and thanked him for lending us the boat. My family will never forget that experience.